What's up, beautiful people? It's Sindafam. Welcome to the channel. Today we'll have this very interesting video, and it's about a couple that adopted 3 black kids 27 years ago, and I'm excited to check this one out as it's interesting to know and to see what they repaid him with. So yeah, I'm excited to check this one out. Let's check it out.
When Officer Joe Cooper got a call one night about some strange noises coming from a derelict flatlet, he never anticipated what he was going to find. What resulted in him adopting 3 little black girls was a moment that changed his life forever. The way they repaid him just 27 years later will leave you in tears. Officer Joe Cooper was on a quiet round one freezing evening in Chicago when he got a call from the precinct. Some old lady had made a complaint that there were strange noises coming from the abandoned flat next door to hers. She wanted the police to check it out, so he gladly obliged and drove there. But after manipulating the door open, he was faced with a sight no grown adult would want to see. There were 3 little girls in front of him covering away from his presence. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10 years old, whilst the second must have been around 6 and the youngest 3 at most. The poor girls looked quite rough. By the looks of them, they hadn't had a proper meal in a good while. Their clothes were filthy and falling apart, and their faces were dirty. These kids were clearly abandoned. This hurt Joe greatly. They reminded him of his daughter he had lost in a car accident just 2 years prior. How someone could abandon them was beyond his belief. He just wanted to wrap them up in a hug and keep them safe. It took some time to garner their trust, but once he was able to do so, he whisked them back to the precinct in his warm car. Back at the precinct, after some hot chocolate and a few chats, it came out that they were in fact the daughters of drug dealers who had decided they no longer wanted them. So when the girls were sleeping, they had just left, leaving them all alone to fend for themselves, which up until that point they had been struggling to do. They were homeless and unloved. Joe tried to continue with his job as normal, but he couldn't shake the image of their little faces when he found them. They deserved better than life had dealt them, so he decided to do something that no one on his force could begin to understand. Something so drastic it had people in absolute awe. Joe decided to formally adopt the girls. Turns out their names were Mia, Letty, and Amy. Amy was the youngest and was absolutely thrilled to be adopted. She loved the idea of having a loving dad and a bed all to herself, while Mia, the oldest, was highly skeptical. She couldn't understand why a grown man would want to take on 3 broken girls just like that. She didn't have the luxury of being innocent and trusting. Life had taught her very hard lessons a girl her age should never have known. But when she heard the story of how he had lost his beloved daughters in such a tragic crash, she began to understand a little better. The poor officer was still grieving the loss of his girls that he hadn't even had the courage to clear out their rooms. This, of course, worked out perfectly, as it gave the girls their own rooms to live in. The 2 youngest shared a room, and toys to play with, and beds to sleep in. Naturally, Joe was quite nervous about them coming to live with him. For almost 2 years, he had been living all alone. His wife had left him after they lost their daughters, so he had been mourning all alone. Despite their apprehension at first, they soon settled into their new home. People that lived around Joe were naturally inquisitive about his new familial additions. Not only because he had adopted 3 little girls, but also because they were black. The fact that a white police officer had adopted 3 little black girls was simply so hard for some people to digest. To them, they felt it was unnatural or strange. But to Joe, all he saw were 3 little girls who needed protection and love. Something he knew he could do, so he took a chance. As time passed, so did the girls begin to warm up slowly to their new dad. Whenever he wasn't working, he made sure to get them out of the house and do something fun. Whether it was rollerblading, playing in the park, or going to the public library. The personalities of the girls each began to shine in their own way. Slowly, Mia began to trust Joe enough to share her love of painting with him. It was here when she was painting that Joe got to see a lighter side to her personality. When she painted, she no longer looked weighed down by the fact that she had been abandoned, but rather was able to surrender to the moment of enjoyment. Once, while painting, she mentioned her parents to Joe, but when she realized what she was doing, she quickly stopped herself. She had brought up too much pain in telling Joe. It was after that moment that Joe realized that the girls were in dire need of therapy. He knew that he didn't have the relevant or appropriate skills needed to help them, so he enrolled them in a therapy program. What the therapist had to share with them after a month of therapy was simply startling. The girls had in many ways been treated like animals. They had been given scraps of whatever the parents hadn't eaten for dinner and were sometimes not fed for a few days. They had only gone to school intermittently when their parents would let them go and were beaten severely if they argued at any point. The youngest had yet to really understand what she had gone through, but the two older girls were wise enough to know that it wasn't right. But the poor things had at one point loved their parents greatly, as young children do, so they had only looked for love and affection. Joe was so grateful he had found them when he did. He made a promise to them and himself that he would do everything in his power to ensure that the sweet trio got only the best in life. As time passed, the little family were able to heal from their own traumas and begin to build new lives for themselves. The girls became more comfortable with their new dad and home. They began to thrive at school and even began to bring friends home with them. One step at a time, they were closer to building and living more normal lives. Joe was thrilled at the idea that he was able to provide them with a loving home and a somewhat normal childhood. Every night before he went to sleep, he could pray that his girls would be able to assimilate into the world once they left school. He had great aspirations for them, hoping that they could achieve anything they set their heart to. In some way, all his prayers paid off in the end as his girls went on to be quite successful. Mia went on to study to be a therapist. It was her intention to help children like her. Letty became an avid journalist reporting on crime and specializing in forensics, whilst little Amy was working towards her PhD in music. Just 27 years later, Joe could hardly contain the pride he had for his children. Little did he know what they had in store for him. It was Amy's graduation when she finally being awarded her doctorate in musical therapy and the brain. Thanks to her compelling and unique thesis, she was asked to present a speech when accepting her award. Joe sat anxiously and proud in the crowd, waiting to hear her speech. But then something strange happened. Amy stood up at the podium and then was joined by her two older sisters. She then began her speech and told the crowd the inspiring story of her beloved adoptive father, how he had gone against all odds to help save them from a life that would in many ways have been a misery. She explained to the crowd how everything she had done would have never been possible without him and his caring heart. Joe could hardly contain his emotions. There, standing and talking in front of hundreds of people, was his little 3-year-old. His little girl, with her big sister shouting his praise. At that very moment, his hardships of single fatherhood all melted away. Every second of blood, sweat and tears had been so worth it. His girls were his everything and they knew it. After all, without him, their life would have had a very different trajectory. It just goes to show that a little love and a lot of compassion can really go a long way.
Exactly.
Would you have adopted the girls if you had found them? What is your stance on adoption? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Until next time.
Oh my God. Wow. This right here is indeed a beautiful one. I got all emotional because this was really beautiful, and regardless, like I keep saying, I can't wait for when we get to a point in the world where people look beyond skin color and just see people as human beings. And this is what the officer just did. He had compassion for these 3 little girls regardless of their skin color. He never saw skin color, or skin color was not a barrier to helping these little girls. And it's just beautiful. It just goes to show you the true heart of men, because many people, regardless of how society want to create a systemic divide between people using their skin color or differences, languages and everything, people can still have compassion for others and not look at skin differences or language barrier and the likes and all. And this right here is beautiful. And notice how they never talked about how skin color limited them. And it just goes to show that sometimes it's just society that is placing that in people's heads. to limit them based on their skin color. Because yes, if the man didn't help them or the police officer didn't help them, it would have been a different issue. But there was a reason why the officer came to the response call to at that time to help them and to rescue them. And this right here is just beautiful, and God bless the officer's heart and God bless the kids' heart, because this is emotional, and this might just be speaking to somebody out there to not look at skin color or skin differences. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment down below. What are your thoughts about this so far? I really love your honest contribution to this. Were you at some point adopted, or did you had adoptive parents, or did you live with your biological parents and all? I would really love your honest contribution to this. I mean, everybody have got different stories, different childhood memories or childhood stories. And yeah, if you're willing to share, I really love you to comment your childhood memories or childhood stories in the comment down below, to encourage other people who don't remember how their childhood was. You can share all the useful information you think might be really helpful. And until next time, see you in the next video.